Customize a process template. In this video, I'm going to show you how to actually customize a XML process template. And I'm also going to show you how to change the metastates and import and export this into your own project. So you can customize it and make Visual Studio, Team Services, or Team Foundation Server work for you and your team. So why are we doing this? Well, Visual Studio Team Services and TFS by default allow you to use either the Agile, Scrum, Kanban, or CMMI, the Capability Maturity Model Index templates by default. But that's usually only going to get you so far. When you start using Visual Studio or Team Foundation Server in anger, you're going to find that you're going to need to change things like the workflow logic to customize it for your organization. So if you have a defect lifecycle, which you need to be able to represent within this application lifecycle management tool, then you want to be able to custom the flows and change the way that your tool actually works within the organization. So how do we go about customizing an XML process template? Well, similar to the migration to Visual Studio Team Services from TFS, you can start by selecting a process template, customizing that particular template, and then uploading the process template to either TFS or Visual Studio, and then create a team project that uses this new template. And then at that point in time, you can verify the changes and make sure that it's working how you expected that customization to work. This is very important because rolling out a new process template, as per the previous video, could cause massive problems. And I've seen large organizations that have not been able to actually use their TFS instance after they've made some changes without understanding the impact of those changes to the process template, such as trying to remove the word bug and change it to the word defect, which was always something that was quite hard to do and required an ALM ranger or someone with an MVP who was very good at understanding the Team Foundation Server and what needed to be changed at different XML and metastates. So what would I recommend? Well, first I'd recommend you use a simple template to start capturing what you need to identify, which values you're going to change and you're going to customize, and also what tool you're going to do, if you're going to remove them or if you're going to add them. So really kind of understand the flow and what the width, the work item type is going to be. So part of that is whether it's a user story or it might be a bug, and which field relates to which system reference. So of course, in the example which you're seeing on the screen at the moment, this was a Jira configuration where the customer was already using Jira and they wanted to see the same fields in Jira as they did now in TFS. So what we did is we actually used the Jira to TFS synchronizer to actually synchronize and populate that, so that way we got all the information in both systems and they could run them in parallel. So part of it is how do you want to customize it and what's the end goal of this particular challenge. So let's start with the process template editor. Now this used to be part of the power tools in earlier versions of Team Foundation Server, but as of 2017, it's now downloadable from the marketplace and goes straight into your tools. So tools, process editor, you can then change the work item types, so WIT, and you're able to open those widths from the server or from a file location. And in this example, I've opened the work item and I've used the Field Explorer to actually understand those mappings between system, values, and whether that's a Boolean, whether that's a string, and also what it would look like on a customized screen. So actually, as you can see, there's all the Jira sync fields which have now been added to a simple bug. So therefore, you might be tracking bugs in Jira, but actually not using TFS, but using TFS to view them. And also attach those to potential code or whatever it may be. So I've seen some very interesting configurations of Team Foundation Server with other ALM tools. So don't be afraid to connect a number of different tools together and try and synchronize them, as you can still get benefits, as most organizations use one or more tools. So when we're looking at customizing the process template, we have to have some kind of goal of what we're trying to do. So in the example here, we've gone from a before where we had some basic information that was captured around, say for instance, a new backlog item. And then the changes that we made then allowed us to, say for instance, define the product backlog item type. So that could be, oh, I want it to be an improvement, some tech debt, a user story. You can customize that to how you work. And then in this case, we've also added in planning. So you can have complexity points, you could have dev complexity points, test complexity, architectures complexity, and then you can start tracking those numbers as time goes through to see whether or not you're getting any better at your planning stages or being able to estimate better using things like Lynchburg estimation methods or whatever else you may use planning poker. So let me take a standard WIT definition and put it into a bit more context. So in this particular example, it's the task type. And what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to be a number of different list items based on whether or not this is, a development, rewrite, it's design, it's documentation. And as you can see, that's just one of the many requirements we might have. It could be changing the priority. It could be adding in effort in hours. It could be an estimate remaining completed, so you can then do those calculations. Or it could be removing items or removing fields. So in this example, what we've now got is a before state where we've not got any of these details, task types, and then we've got things like the effort on the other side. So you can see from the task type, we can do a drop down, and now we've got the drop down on that list. So we're changing the behavior of tasks to include additional fields, mandatory or optional. So when it comes to changing these process changes, how do we go about doing it? Well, first of all, you need to understand maybe potentially the workflow transitions. So this could be something like, well, we only want it to go from one particular state to another state for a particular team, for not a certain team, that they can make changes or they can't make changes. So that way you don't have developers, say for instance, opening something, closing it, reopening it, and then closing it, and not being able to track those stages, even if it's just got a counter that checks how many times a defect's opened or closed. And you may be looking at checking for defects or duplicate defects, which is going to be an example we're going to give later. So within the WIT designer, we can actually design these workflows, and these workflows could change how the actual states change. So that's starting with a new to in progress and then done. You may want to add some additional steps in there. So let me give you a quick example. So this is taking the defect lifecycle management component, and which was going from the standard by default, new, approved, committed, done, and then we can also add the removed component if no longer required, to a new in development, in code review, awaiting test, maybe in test and then you don't need it anymore, or it goes back to another state, and then done. So this is how a particular organization wanted their defect lifecycle. Therefore, we change that using the WIP designer. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a quick example of how you can actually change your process template. Okay, so I'm going to go to the processes and I'm going to look at adding a customized process. Now at the moment, we're using the Agile template, which is a system process. And now I want to add something that allows me to do customizations. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click and create inherited process. And it's going to take everything from the Agile process template and move it to my new process template. So now that I've got this new process template, of course, I want to be able to make some changes to it. So I can make changes to, say, for instance, what the epics are called. So in this case, I'm going to call that value. Okay. And now that will change and it will look differently, just like that whole backlog, defects, bug statements. So how you can change those. So if I go back, and as you'll see, there's currently no projects that are being using this, which is why I've got to commit this first. I could add a new work item. I could change how, for instance, the bugs work. So let me go to bugs. And at this particular case, I want to make sure that no duplicate defects happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get extensions. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a duplicate bug field. So this little tool will identify whether or not there's a similar defect and therefore remove the duplication of defects much quicker. So I'm just going to add this to my marketplace, add it to my Visual Studio Team Services account. Of course, I could download this to TFS if need be, and then I can just go back to my account. So that's now been added, but also I want to be able to add a multiple selection of fields. So I'm going to add another extension in here that allows me to have multi-values. So same process, but this time it's going to allow me to select what operating system it was and numerous ones. So in the case of this defect happens on both Windows 2016 Server and also Windows 10 Anniversary Edition. So back to go, straight back through, down to process. Now I'm going to want to add this custom control. So this custom control is this multi-value control, which I've just downloaded. And what I do is I need to give it a name. The name is going to be operating system. And then I'm going to give it some examples. So Windows 10, Windows Server, and I'm going to put in Linux. This one is already available, so I'm just going to call that OS. And then it just needs to select the necessary component, so found in environment. Okay, so now I can pull that up and I'm going to drop it into the system information section. Okay, so we're going to now need to create potentially a new page with some additional information, and in some new fields that I want, I can create new ones, which could be text, or it could be Boolean, integer, it could be a list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new field, and this new field will be WinOps, and I'd like it to pick a list. So this is now in there, and I could now add another field in here, but this time I want it from a current value, and then I can commit this. Let me go back to processes. So we now have a WinOps process, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new team project with this template. So as you see, it's picked the WinOps process, and I'm just going to call this WinOps. Okay, now that's loaded, let's go in to the work items and create a bug. So what we should see is under here, we should be able to select multiple Windows 10 and Windows Server items. So we now got those two, which has been a customization that we've made. And you've also seen we've got the additional value where we can assign it to somebody. And we've also got a yes/no field here, which we can add to. So as you've just seen, we've customized a process template. And now that's available for the Process Template Manager to make any further customizations within Visual Studio IDE. Or I could then go through and potentially apply that inherited process template to existing projects now that I know it works and it's correct. So in this section, we've covered off exploring the process template types and customizing a process template. We've covered off Agile and DevOps and how they apply to your projects. We've then moved on to Kanban and Lean and how to optimize your DevOps processes, followed by dashboards and queries and how to build insight-driven projects. Then we've moved into scaling Agile, using your DevOps processes and cascading those KPIs from teams to projects to portfolio. And then finally moves on to alerts. And this will give you the updates that you need using tools like enterprise collaboration tools like Slack and Microsoft Teams. And then finally, we've gone into customizing your process template and how you apply that.